All right, what are we calling this thing?
The podcast as a whole, or this episode?
The whole podcast.
I don't know. That's a good lead-in, though.
The Downshift podcast. I don't know what we call it.
Yeah, why not?
The freewheel.
The freewheel.
I'm gonna keep pitching that.
I think Downshift.
The Downshift podcast.
Why would it not be the Downshift podcast?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, welcome to the Downshift podcast. This is episode, I think we're up to number 7. We took a little break. But today we're actually going to be talking about a couple of neat topics. We've got Jeff Todd, who's the owner of Roanoke Mountain Adventures. So we're going to be chatting with him about what RMA is. A lot of people still don't know what RMA is. They haven't been in here to look at the awesomeness that is RMA. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then also about bike laws. We're at here, it's the end of March. And so we're getting a lot of people that are getting out riding their bikes, and there's still a wild amount of confusion from motorists and cyclists alike as to what bicycles are allowed to do on the road and what their rights and responsibilities are. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So moving right along, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, we've got, if you're new to Downshift or if you're new to RMA, Roanoke Mountain Adventures, and you can fill in the details here, is a consignment shop located in Wasena. And it's one of the greatest parts of Roanoke, honestly. I mean, it is full of fantastic consignment gear, excellent bike service, friendly and helpful staff. And it's a great part of Roanoke, and it's part of the reason why I'm still in Roanoke, because it's such a great place to be. So I'll let Jeff kind of fill in the details as far as what RMA is and what you offer.
Yeah, wow. I didn't realize I was going to get teed up like that. I'm just going to make it sound less exciting and good. RMA, think of myself as kind of a caretaker for the business, because just like you, I love the business as a customer and had the opportunity to purchase it about 2 years ago. And so super excited to be able to kind of carry forward what was already a great business, and then working together with you, obviously, on the bike side of things has been amazing. Love to have, this super full inventory of bikes, which we never had anything like this. Now we're offering full service for bikes. And just hoping to be a friendly presence here, both in the outdoor industry generally, and then also on the bike side of things. Exciting news in the shop. We're now going to be a Marin dealer,
which is very cool.
Yeah, and we're gonna, still have the Ibis bikes from Downshift. We also now have a fleet of Rad Power e-bikes, which we'll be renting and doing e-bike tours with. So lots of fun new stuff going on in addition to what RMA always used to do. And so, yeah, just thrilled to be a part of it all.
Yeah, so if you haven't been down here yet, the key takeaways really are, if you need anything bike related, so rentals, sales, service, advice, this is the place to come. We have, Jeff and I, however you want to talk about it, the shop, we'll just say, has experts in everything from commuting to downhill mountain biking and everything in between. And so any bike related topic, if you want to come in, we'd be happy to chat with you about what your questions are, what your concerns are, any kind of need you have. And we're not going to say we can sell you everything, because we certainly can't, but if we don't have that service or sale item, we can definitely point you in the right place and where to go. And so tell people kind of about the rentals and tours and how they can find out more information about that.
Yeah, well, and let me also add on the point you just made. I think that's a key point, that we are hoping to be a community resource. Because mostly we sell used bikes, we are often not going to have exactly what you need. Okay. So we're looking to help people figure out what it is that's really going to suit them. And we're more than happy to refer them elsewhere to other local shops or whatever the case may be to find that need. If we can't fulfill it, hopefully we can. We love when we're able to. But on the rental side of things, we have always been done bike rentals since before I purchased the business. So we'll be continuing that for sure. There are some big challenges, as you well know, with the supply side in the bike industry. And so that's something that we're still addressing. We do have, for sure, our people remember the old Zagster bikes, which used to be a ride share. Now they are our kind of standard Greenway rental bikes. They're very hardy bikes, and we've kind of refurbished them, and keeping them running has been a good thing for the community, I think. So those are our kind of just get around town bikes. Then we have these fun adventure bikes from a company called Roll, which are sportier. You can get out there, do some miles. We had some people ride them up on like Roanoke Mountain, so we know they can handle some terrain. and some hills, and then mountain bikes, of course. And then on the e-bike side, we're super excited to kind of. I mean, you're the e-bike guy.
Yep.
You mentioned e-bikes to downhill bikes. I don't think you're the downhill guy. That would be Cody, our most recent addition to the team. But yeah, so the e-bikes, we are kind of ironing out the final things with insurance and waiting for that final pallet to roll. Then we're going to have rad power bikes. You can just show up, grab them, hop right on the Greenway right behind the shop here, see what that's about, or you can do an e-bike tour. That is still going to require a few more pieces to
and
be
details
set up.
To be posted on the website, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
RoanokeMountainAdventures.com.
RoanokeMountainAdventures.com. We have online booking available right now just for the Greenway and adventure bikes, but we'll be building that out, and so it's all very easy and simple to do. But of course, people can also just give a call or show up if they want more information.
Which is awesome. I mean, so, just thinking about these tours, which is something that, hasn't been offered in Roanoke yet. My thoughts on that, like, I'm picturing, groups of people staying downtown in a hotel or at an Airbnb and saying, like, what can we do in Roanoke? And, like, they walk in and they're like, hey, let's rent an e-bike or let's do an e-bike tour. And so there will be, these great rad power bikes that will go out and either be like a daily rental or a tour.
Yep.
And then they'll be either guided or self-guided, I'm guessing. Which is fantastic. And the benefit, if you're not familiar with e-bikes, the benefit is it's way less work and you get to have fun riding the bike as opposed to sweating and dying on the hills around
Hopefully
here.
not dying. Flatten those hills.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk more about e-bikes when we get into these rules and regulations. But if you're new to the e-bike world or if you're new to cycling in general, this is the place to learn more. Like Jeff had mentioned, we've got a lot of used bikes, so we can talk to you about what e-bikes are and what a regular bike is and how they're different and how they're the same. The kind of the takeaway from this conversation is really, if you're not familiar with this shop, please come down because it will blow you away with everything that they've got going on and all the great people that are here.
I will say too, like what part that I love about it, this shop specifically, and also what myself and some of the other folks here, we're not all like lifelong bike nerds like you. And I say that lovingly.
Yeah, of course.
But like I've traveled the path of learning about bikes, relatively recently. It's been like 10 years for me. And I'm still growing and learning and adding new elements of it that I enjoy. And now I've kind of run the full gamut, whether it's with my children or myself, getting into road biking or mountain biking or helping my mom get back on her bike after not riding one for a long time. So, but we're not into that kind of, we appreciate really nice things. We appreciate really nice bikes, but we're looking to mostly help people find out how they fit and how bikes can work for them.
Right.
And that's what's cool about the e-bike thing, which is still really new for me. And I've learned a lot from you already, but yeah, just trying to be a resource for people in that way and kind of help them wherever they're at in their own kind of personal bike journey.
Right,
so.
Which is great. And like to sort of, to add to that, there's very little, if any, bro culture here. And, when you come in with your, older bike that might be a little rusty, you're not going to get looked down upon. No one's going to talk down about your equipment. That's not, this shop is not about that. It's about getting people out, enjoying riding bikes, and, taking advantage of all the great stuff we have here in Roanoke, from the greenways to the Blue Ridge Parkway to adventure rides and gravel and mountain and everything in between. So, give us details about shop address, phone number, hours, all those good things.
Yeah, sure. So we are now closed on Wednesdays, but otherwise we're open 10 to 6 every day of the week. The shop is located at 806 Wasena Avenue, which is the River House building, which is where the rock climbing gym is, the Wasena City Tap House. So in the Wasena neighborhood here. So it's a very large building. We are a bit tucked away, but head towards the river. Don't drive all the way in, but we're in the back lot. Head to the website if you need to find us. But and then I think we are still building out the website in terms of shop, ride, social kind of things.
That's right.
That's something that we'll be working with Downshift.
Featured on additional podcasts.
Yes, and right now though we've got the Thursday night special, our mountain bike ride, which has been going on for years and years now, and then the Downshift what is it? The Roanoke Slow Ride.
Roanoke
I think
Slow
is
Roll.
What we're,
Yeah,
slow
we just
roll, sorry.
rebranded it because it
The
used to be the
Slow Roll.
Downshift shop ride, but since we don't have a shop anymore.
So every other Monday night. So, but that stuff will all be on the website soon. If you know, sort of an events calendar.
Cool. Well, thank you again for that great explanation of what RMA is, and we're going to move on to the second part of our conversation here, which is laws surrounding cycling in Virginia and rights and responsibilities as well for drivers and bicyclists. And so there's been a few law changes here since July of 2021. So we're coming on to the second season of those law changes. But I'm going to start kind of at the top of this list and go through some stuff, and you and I will talk about things. Interesting side note is that Jeff is actually an ex-lawyer, current lawyer, former lawyer. How do you want to?
Once you're a lawyer, they don't let you out easily. So, but I have not practiced in some time. But I am trained in the dark arts.
Do you still hold your bar license in Virginia?
I'm on a bad list of people that don't pay their dues because
Gotcha.
I didn't feel like paying my dues anymore.
Yeah, so take his opinion with that in mind.
Don't rely upon it.
But anyway, so yeah, there's a few things that a lot. Well, I'm just going to start reading. I'm going to put on my old man glasses here and look at this. So the big takeaway from this is that if you ride a bicycle on Virginia's roads, you are considered a vehicle. And so you have those same rights and responsibilities as if you were behind the wheel of a car. And so that carries a lot of weight to it because people don't understand those rules. And you know, the big thing here, first of all, this page or these notes are from the VDOT website, and I'll link this in the description of the video, but it's a very well-written, concise list of all the rules and laws and responsibilities that cyclists and motorists have in Virginia, and it references the legal code in Virginia as well, so you can actually look up the code if you want, and VDOT has updated this, and it seems like they update it pretty frequently, so this is a really cool resource. So I'm just going to read verbatim here from this one section of rights and duties of a cyclist in Virginia. The first line I already mentioned, having all the rights and responsibilities of a driver. Bicyclists and other users on sidewalks, shared use paths, and crosswalks have all the rights and duties of a pedestrian under those circumstances. So what that means is if you take your bicycle from the roadway and now enter a sidewalk, you are acting as a pedestrian at that point in time. You are no longer considered a vehicle on the road. And so for things like crosswalk stops or traffic control devices for pedestrians, you must abide by those rules. And so as a great example, in Alaska, there's a shared use path that runs adjacent to the roadway. And that shared use path, when it approaches an intersection, will have had pedestrian control devices. And I was always under the impression, well, I'm not a pedestrian, so why do I need to stop for that hand? But that's actually against the law. So you would need to stop for that because once you enter that intersection in a multi-use path or in a crosswalk, you are now a pedestrian. Any thoughts or comments?
I'm just rewinding my bike ride this morning and all of the laws I broke, but which is actually part of what's so difficult about being a cyclist, right? Is that you go from being a vehicle to a pedestrian, just like that.
And to touch on that note, you are legally entitled to do that. And so I've read a whole host of comments on Facebook and other social media about people who are anti-bike. And, oh, well, you can't dodge in and out of sidewalks. That's against the law. It's not. I mean, you have to use caution to make sure that you don't put yourself or others in dangerous circumstances. But you are 100% in your right to go from the sidewalk to the roadway and back, especially if there's a safety concern for you as the rider. I have another thing here that says, on shared use paths, highways, and marked crosswalks, without a stop sign or without a traffic control device, bicyclists and pedestrians are not required to come to a full stop. However, they must not enter the road in disregard of approaching traffic, which I find is interesting as well. So, you know, what that means is, you know, while you might not be forced to stop, you can't just dart out in front of a car and when they hit you, you know, claim that, oh, I was within my rights because I was in the crosswalk. No, you actually have to make sure that there's no one else approaching. And it doesn't say yield. So, Mr. Lawyer, if you want to read that line down there.
No wonder you need
Do you
the
need
glasses.
old man glasses too? So that bottom line, it just says, I think the key word is not to disregard. What does it say? Yeah, in disregard of approaching traffic. So it doesn't mention anything about yield. So that's an interesting one that we'll have to go to the courts if someone were to get hit on a bicycle in a crosswalk, but without any stop sign. Right, I mean, don't you agree? Isn't that kind of how, like, it's sort of vague?
Yeah,
right?
not enter in disregard of would, seem to suggest that you don't have to yield.
Right.
You just can't, like, I mean, I think that may be a practical nod to the fact that bikes can go much faster than people on foot.
Right.
But that's a pretty mushy duty to put on a cyclist. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, right.
I'm not
Like,
really sure.
if you're moving slow, can you enter the crosswalk in front of a slow moving vehicle? Like, to me, that
Right.
seems like you can, as long as you're giving, as long as you are aware of your surroundings and realize that you're not impeding their flow.
Well, and also, it's one of those things too, where crosswalks right now, I mean, you drive by and see crosswalks, people are standing there for 20 minutes. They're
Right.
waiting for cars to not be present, even though they do have
Right.
have the right of way there very clearly.
Yep.
So, as a practical matter, it would obviously be unwise to
Yeah.
enter without regard or whatever. So maybe that's a good rule anyway.
Yeah. Just make sure there's no traffic coming and then don't get hit.
Like, you don't want to get hit and very badly injured and then win a lawsuit. You just would rather not get struck in the first place.
Good point. This one is actually really interesting, I think. So I'm going to give you a quiz. So let's say you're on your road bike and you come to the Main Street light over here, and let's say it's late, 2 a.m. You're getting back from your bar ride, right?
And it's a four-way intersection.
Four-way
Yeah.
light, so traffic light.
Both lights.
Yeah, you come to the light, and the light doesn't turn green for you.
Yeah, which it wouldn't, actually. This particular one,
Right.
if I was trying to cross Main Street, they have sensors and they won't go off.
So
for
what are
bikes.
you legally allowed to do in that situation?
I mean, I know I would treat it as a stop sign.
Yep. So that's partially correct. So you get 50% for that one. So the way the law is written in that case, so again, to go over what we're talking about, is if you come to a traffic light and the bike doesn't have enough metal to trigger those little sensors in the ground, and it won't change for you, right? What are you allowed to do? So the way the law is written is you do treat it as a stop sign, but you have to wait at least 2 minutes or 2 light cycles. And then after those, whichever of those comes first, then there's some other sub notes here, like determine that it's safe. Obviously, don't cross in front of a moving vehicle. But then you can proceed through the intersection.
2 minutes is psychotic.
Yeah.
Also, like, you inevitably would end up sitting there at the light with vehicles backed up behind you, and they also wouldn't trigger the light. They'd probably be really happy.
So that's it is interesting. I know that I, not to self-incriminate myself, but I have not waited the 2 minutes, but that is the rule. So if you ever do encounter someone who questions you with your behavior, you can tell them that you waited 2 minutes or 2 light cycles. All right, so let's see. So we're moving on to where bicycles can ride. So obviously bikes can ride on the road. We mentioned that they can ride on sidewalks. There is a little sort of, we'll call it a caveat, sub-note, that you should check where bikes are actually allowed on sidewalks, because certain municipalities, Roanoke included, in downtown, you are not legally allowed to ride your bikes on the sidewalk. And how would you know that? Well, probably look for a sign. Does Roanoke have signs anywhere that you've seen?
No, I don't think so. And I was going to say, I mean, I will self-incriminate that. I absolutely did that this morning. I've definitely never seen such a sign.
No, and I know, the reason I know that is because I actually knew someone who was ticketed by a Roanoke City police officer for riding on the sidewalk. In all fairness, I do believe he was warned by the same officer to not do that. So hopefully, with him being on notice, he just disregarded that notice and continued to ride. Now, he was doing work for a sandwich delivery place or something like that, and he felt it was not safe to be in the roadway downtown, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. But those are the kinds of things that need to either be changed or addressed by additional bike lanes and changing, city council laws and rules around those types of things. So really the best way to approach that is to vote and go to your city council meetings and talk about bike infrastructure. Did you know that required by law, you have to signal? So your left turn, right turn, stop.
How do you signal a stop?
It's like a you do like this kind of thing.
Okay.
Like, which I never do. I typically will signal like left and right,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I try to, although, it can be hard when you're like banking on a road bike to take a handoff.
yeah. It says bicyclists must, and then must signal their intentions to turn. And it says if you have to have your hands on the bars, they don't have to be continuous. So right turn may be signaled with the right arm. The signals do not need to be given continuously if both hands are needed to control the bicycle. Another interesting point about turning left. So if you come to an intersection, a four-way intersection, and you want to make a left turn, how do you do it? Do you act as a vehicle? Like, do you like get in the left turn lane and turn left? Do you move to the shoulder? Do you go to the sidewalk? Like, can you do all three?
I mean, I act like a vehicle primarily. I would occupy the turn lane. I think where it gets tricky is you're always instinctually staying to the right of whatever lane you're in.
Yep.
But that gets really dodgy. So
Yeah.
to me, hopefully you're anticipating it. I would occupy the full lane of traffic I'm in advance of the need to move over to the left, and then signal my intention to the cars behind me.
And you can, that is correct. So you can do that. So what Jeff is saying is like, if there's a left turn lane and a straight or a right turn lane, you can move into that left turn lane and then turn left through the intersection. You are also allowed to stay to the shoulder, go to the opposite end of the corner. So you're crossing the first street, but then you need to stop and then wait for the green light to go across the other way. Or you can actually move over into the sidewalk, into the crosswalk, then walk your bike through the crosswalk, or pay attention to the pedestrian signal and then continue on with your left turn. So you can do all three.
Well, I think it's a good point. Like just these kinds of rules speak to the fact that as much as possible, you want to know your route and your intentions. Of course, you shouldn't have to, but if you're trying to make left turns or cross and stop and then go straight, you could end up getting in a dodgy situation if you're not aware of where you're at and kind of anticipating what you're going to be doing, especially since vehicles typically don't do a good job of giving enough space. So.
Yeah. And so in that same sort of context about rules and lanes, there's actually some really interesting rules here that we'll talk about next, which is where a lot of the contention comes from. So bicyclists must follow the flow of traffic on the right side of the highway. And when I say highway, the legal definition for highway is essentially any road that vehicles are permitted on. So it doesn't mean interstate, it just means road. So stay with the flow of traffic, obviously, so stay on the right. This is interesting. So bicyclists operating a bicycle on a roadway at less than the normal speed of traffic at the time and place under conditions then existing shall ride as close as safely practicable to the right curb or edge. So condensing that down is stay to the right, essentially. So you can't remain in the center of the road unless, and I'll get to that here in a second, unless there's safety concerns or debris, a reason that you're not near the right, essentially. So if you're impeding traffic and it's not due to a hazard or that you're making a turn or whatever, Virginia law requires you to be to the right.
What was that speed? Did it say speed limit though?
It didn't say speed limit. It said, it's interesting legal vagueness, right? So it says the normal speed of traffic.
So when everybody's going 45 and a 25. Because I was going to say, it makes me think about riding on Main Street here, which I do quite frequently. We have bike lanes. They often have debris and or vehicles parked in them. Thanks, guys. But it's a road where on a road bike you can easily go the speed limit. And sometimes because of the unsafe road lane or bike lane conditions, I will just simply hop out into the lane for that reason. But at given times, I would easily be at or just above the speed limit, but there's still cars sitting there wanting to go 40 way over the speed limit.
Of course.
So
well, and then they can wait. But and that's a good point. And and downtown Roanoke is another example of that. Like when I ride downtown, I ride in the middle of the lane because I'm pretty sure it's 25 downtown, right?
You also don't want to get doored, so.
Right, and so that is another safety hazard. So in those situations, you are allowed to ride in the center of the roadway.
It might even be 15.
It
parts
might
of
be.
downtown.
Another interesting point here. So if you need to pass somebody, this is an interesting thing. You can legally pass a vehicle on the right or the left. It does not have to be on the left. Obviously, it's a safety concern. If the vehicle's planning on turning right, you don't want to turn in front of them. But you are not required to go around them on the left. You can pass them right or left. Bicyclists, this is one of the law changes that I think people are either confused about or don't understand. So as of July 1st, 2021, bicyclists can ride 2 abreast at all times on all state and local roadways, but you can't do it on the Blue Ridge Parkway or Skyline Drive. So BRP riders, you can't ride 2 abreast, sorry. What is 2 abreast? 2 abreast is side by side this way, right? So if the road's going like this, you can be in the lane, again, off to the right, but 2 abreast. And so that's a big change for a lot of reasons. Number one, it is you're more visible when you're like this, 2 abreast, because you have a bigger object that people can see. And it is actually a shorter passing distance for cars because they're passing 1 blob instead of 2 longer blobs. And so the distance required to pass is actually quite a bit shorter. There is a caveat to the 2 abreast in terms of, and actually it's both 2 abreast and single riders. And what I'm getting at is when the car does do the pass, the rules are required for that are also different. And so it used to be that the car had to give the cyclist 3 feet of space. So 3 feet is like a pool noodle, I think people use, right? So 36 inches of space from their vehicle to the cyclist. The way the code is written now, and let me see if I can find it because I know it's probably hidden in here. Motorists must approach and pass a bicyclist, again, or a 2-up, what did I just call it? 2 abreast.
2 abreast.
Or a group of 2 abreast riders at a reasonable speed. What's reasonable, Mr. Law?
Let's ask the jury. Yeah, I mean, like typically all of those kinds of terms are going to be determined by some combination of, this is how the common law works. We get these terms, and its reasonableness is like looking at all the factors. Of course, speed limit is going to be one, but is it ever reasonable to be above the speed limit? Maybe Virginia law may have clearer standards on what, right, in this case of a speed limit, from the automotive context. Obviously, there's a million cases involving car crashes. Yeah. So, any judge would be looking to that. But I would imagine that your average motorist that's approaching cyclists from behind is probably not driving at a reasonable speed. Yeah. Although I will say, sometimes it's frustrating when you're biking and there's a car like camped right behind you. You can feel that vehicle sitting there, and you're kind of like, hey, if I go down somehow, you're going to just run me over. And you feel that pressure. So sometimes it is nice when the vehicle just hangs back, finds their moment, and then passes you, quickly, because a slow pass after dragging behind you for a long time can actually be really dangerous. So. Yep. And I'll continue with the line. Maybe
here.
That's reasonable. Maybe that's the reasonable speed.
And so it is in those situations. It is good to have that kind of vagueness to it because there is. In most legal arguments, discussions around these kinds of things, it's good to sometimes have that vague kind of language because it's all circumstantial relating to one instance, right? And so, but again, motorists must approach and pass a bicyclist at reasonable speed with at least 3 feet to the left of the bicycle, okay? If the lane is not narrow enough to allow 3 feet of space, the motorist must change lanes. So here's where that on paper comes to the real world. If you're in a separated bike lane and you're traveling, the correct route, correct direction, the car approaches you, most of the time those separated bike lanes have enough space to allow 3 feet so the cars can pass without changing lanes. if you are, for example, riding on Main Street where there is no bike lane, kind of up past the light over here on Brambleton, if a car approaches you and they can't stay in the lane and pass you at 3 feet, they have to change lanes. So they have to go outside the double yellow into the complete opposite lane and change lanes to pass you.
Which would be illegal.
Right, under normal circumstances, or...
I don't know. It might be still illegal.
No. That's what I'm saying. So you're allowed to pass...
I don't know. You can cross a double yellow, you think?
Yes, yeah, 100%.
Really?
Yep. So they, and it's written, VDOT doesn't specifically mention that, but if you go to the subsection, you are allowed to cross the double yellow.
That could get really spicy.
Well, right. And
going
so,
up hills.
Yeah,
especially.
so hills and also blind curves and stuff. So again, it's the motorist's responsibility to be aware of those surroundings, obviously, because the biker can't control their behavior. The biker is going to, their responsibility is to stay to the right and allow that vehicle to pass at a reasonable, hopefully a reasonable speed and in a reasonable amount of time. But yeah, you're allowed to cross the double yellow to pass that vehicle. And that is what changed on July of this year. So that's what's different. And another point about motorists passing in lines, it says just below that motorists may not cross a solid line into a bicycle lane to pass other vehicles. So typical example I see all the time is like people waiting to get into like a Starbucks or something, and cars will just shoot over into that bike lane and you pass on the right. And I mean, it's super dangerous for a ton of reasons, but the most annoying thing is that they don't know who's there, right? There could be a person in that bike lane. And
yeah, I think that it's just that as a driver, and I'm sure most people listening to this podcast probably don't need this explanation, but like you're not always entitled to keep moving at the same speed and in the same direction as you might wish.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to wait a minute, not even 2 minutes, Yeah. Just like maybe 1 minute, not even 1 minute.
You have to have some patience.
Just slow down a little bit.
Yeah. So that's cool. So we covered that. So there's just a few other things to talk about here, and then we're done. A couple interesting things that they've added under safety considerations. Bicyclists must not carry articles which prevent them from keeping at least one hand on the handlebars. So if you're carrying your dog or whatever, you have to at least have one hand on the bars at all times.
I got 2 children.
Yeah, there you go. Bicycles must not attach themselves or their bicycles to any other vehicle on the roadway. So you can't double up or grab onto a car and go down the road. Bicyclists are not permitted to wear earphones in both ears while riding a bike. So you can have one AirPod in and still ride, which is cool. Bicyclists riding a Class 3 electric bicycle, which we didn't talk about the classes, but Class 3 is over 28 miles an hour and no throttle. So if you're riding a Class 3 bicycle, you are required to wear a helmet, which is interesting because otherwise there are no helmet laws in Virginia for 14 and over. And it's only certain localities that have the 14 and under requirement. And I don't know, let's see, independent cities. Is Roanoke on here? Roanoke is on here. So in Roanoke, if you are under the age of 14, you must wear a helmet.
But not Roanoke County.
But not Roanoke County. Interesting. Let me think. I think we're done, but let me just see if there's anything that I forgot. Oh, there's one other thing about lanes to add more to the lane confusion and hopefully make it less confusing. So a great example is, have you ridden Wanju Street where the entrance to the highway is? Mm-hmm. And you see this all the time with like roads and highways merging. You have 2 lanes, right? You have your straight lane and then you have your like merge lane.
That's going onto the highway.
That's going onto the highway. Yep. So where are you allowed to be if you're riding your bike? Where are you? Like, give me your personal experience, and then where do you think legally you're allowed to be?
I mean, yeah, in that circumstance, I would imagine. I would definitely stay in the lane of traffic. I would not go into the merge lane because that's also, I'm sure, unlawful to be riding your bicycle on the highway there. So, that particular form of highway.
Interstate. Yes.
Yeah, the interstate. So. I would definitely just, stay where I was at. I would also be, extremely concerned for my safety riding in that particular spot on a busy day.
Yeah, and that's correct. And so the code specifically mentions if you have what is a turn-only lane or a merge lane, you are allowed to be outside of that to the left, right? So you're allowed to be in that secondary lane that's traveling forward and not be not be camped out riding slow in the merge lane or in the turn only lane. You're allowed to be over one, but you're not allowed to lane split. So if there are 2 lanes in a road, you cannot be in that left-hand lane unless you're turning left. So you can't just stay in that left lane and go straight. You have to be in the right side lane. And then to talk about your highway thing. So if bikes are allowed essentially on any roadway in Virginia other than the interstate and any other marked roadway. So if there's some sort of weird private road that doesn't allow bikes, then you can't be there.
Their loss.
Yeah, it's 100% right. Anyway, this is a really cool conversation, and thank you for joining. Did you learn anything?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, I am not a lifelong bike person, and so, I started out riding like an old road bike around Denver, so I definitely kind of got the full experience, like potholes and crazy driving and all of that. But I didn't learn anything. I didn't take a class to learn this stuff. I just started riding the bike around and and just kind of hoping for the best, I guess. So, I mean, I think it would be interesting. I know the city at times has done like a bike commuting kind of course.
Like safe cycling course, I think.
Yeah,
which is cool.
And I mean, all of this stuff is obviously critical to know, but then there's all the practicalities that you have to know that I think are, far more important to like your actual safety.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting just thinking about the way these rules actually interact with your experience riding, because like I know for me, for example, I will try not to just tuck into a bike lane when there's going to be poor visibility, or stay if there is no bike lane. If you're buried in on the right and there's cars that can emerge from side streets or whatever, then they might not see you, or the cars trailing you might not see you because you're kind of low to the ground, and there's other visual things going on over there, mailboxes and signs. So I will actually try to stay out, and if I feel a car coming, then I'll move over, to kind of make sure they see me.
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting to know, but I'm still definitely a proponent of being really aware, not just of what you're sort of entitled to do, but what's going to actually make you safe.
Yep. And there was one. The one last thing here I want to talk about, which is when you said visibility, I remember reading, and it surrounds the laws around lighting. And let me see if I can find it, because here you go. So there's some equipment, 2 equipment laws in here that Virginia has as well. The first is that bicycles ridden on the highways must have brakes which skid the wheels on dry, clean pavement. So you must have very well functioning brakes, rule number 1. Rule number 2, if you're riding between the hours of sunset and sunrise, you have to have a headlamp being visible at least 500 feet to the front and a red reflector on the rear. Now, on roads with a posted speed limit of 35 miles an hour or greater, you have to additionally have a rear tail light visible from 500 feet to the rear. It must be solid or steady, blinking, and visible under all conditions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's one I personally have moved to always, not always, but definitely if I'm like on the road bike, and I get on a road, I always have both front and rear. And during daytime, I'll turn the front on to like a blinking, because I've personally seen, like, thankfully no one get actually hurt, but I've seen a lot of instances where you're riding down a road and then people pull up like to a stop sign that tees up to that road, and they do that kind of a thing. Yeah. And then they might see you at the last minute or not, and so like to me, having that kind of blinking light is exactly just to catch their eye, hopefully. And then obviously, anytime at night, but I definitely also always use a tail light for the same reason. But even in the middle of the day. So to me, that's certainly sensible, but it's just so much easier to just always throw those lights on the bike. Keep the things attached. Right. Plug them in to charge them if you have a USB charger style. Yep. Put them on every time you ride, then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, because you really do. I mean, you have to just assume that people do not see you, and they are going to look. And I've had this happen numerous times. People will turn their head and like you'll see them through their windshield, and they will look right through you into the lane and not see you there.
Yep.
And you have to make an emergency stop or swerve, and so lighting will change that. I mean, that's the idea, is that they will see that light, and then hopefully avoid you and not hit you or you hit them. No, this was cool. I think that if people still have questions or concerns, or if they're confused about stuff, ask questions in the comments, and we'll try and do our best to reach out and either chat with some experts or research the code and figure out what we forgot to mention, or clarify things that we did talk about. And again, to talk about how great RMA is, if you have questions about cycling in Roanoke and wondering where you can ride or where is it safe to ride, come in and chat, because we've got lots of people here that can help point you in the right direction, and give you advice, like saying, hey, there's a bike lane here. That's going to be a pretty safe place to ride. Or if you're really uncomfortable riding on the road, we've got the Greenway, or we've got group rides that we're going to be doing that hopefully will give you a little more sense of confidence and gaining that experience and being out there on two wheels.
Yeah, and I think as a practical matter, there are definitely roads to be fearful of that I would not personally, like there's definitely roads that I just really wouldn't ride on pretty much.
Yeah.
And then there's also situations where riding on the road I think is pretty safe because you're able to be kind of in control of the situation, but there's a lot of subtleties to understanding which one is which, and just stuff like, well, I'm staying to the right, but now I see there's a lot of situations where a car door might open, or there's blind T's that people could come up and not see you because you are crouched down. So a lot of subtlety to this, and there's no real substitute probably for just doing it. But always happy to help with advice and hopefully getting people comfortable.
Yeah, and out on the road. That's our mission.
Exactly.
Get people on bikes.
With helmets.
Yeah. Bicycling law.
Reset.
Hello, we're
Reset.
closed. Start over.
You gotta let it ring out, or they're gonna know we.
Yeah. Can you probably can't mute it, can you?
Yeah.